Oh, hey.
What's up? We are back.
Guess who's back? Back again.
Apparently, Shady is back.
Oh,
though.
yeah, dude.
Uh,
The
that new-
VMAs, like, did you see?
I didn't see the VMAs, but I did see the video with him and LL Cool J.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if I saw the music video, but yeah, he did. He came out.
Are they gonna save rap?
He came out. He came out swinging at the VMAs, which was cool.
I'm gonna have to watch that on YouTube.
Shady's back.
Are they gonna save rap? Is that what it is?
Oh, I don't know.
It needs to be saved.
I don't know. Maybe it does it.
Revived.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be seen.
It's good to see you. We haven't, in all honesty, TV Lane, we haven't recorded in a month.
Well, yeah, they know because there's been a
Right.
couple of weeks where they're like, well, what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's the topic of today's conversation is
What happened?
what happened.
Oh, okay.
And for both of us. And I think those of you watching are going to, if you stick with it, some of you are really going to have an incredible experience with this episode.
And some may not.
And some may not.
It's good. It's good to be here with you. It's good to sit here and do this thing.
So there's so much to cover.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Well, a couple of things. Steve Bacon died.
Oh, shoot. You have an NDE? What happened?
I know some of you are probably like, well, you're sitting right there.
I mean,
Right?
yeah, there's a pulse.
Let's back it up a few so that you can understand the death of Steve Bacon. When Steve was a young man, right after his first attempt at suicide, he always tells in his story that he didn't want to die after that. He just wanted to learn how to live.
How old were you at that point?
Probably 18-ish. And so, they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And so, not too long after that, this guy named Hank shows up. Everybody knows the story. And Hank put Steve on a path to living. And it was through entrepreneurship, through personal development, right? But Steve had this idea in his head of what the pinnacle of him being successful looks like. And that was the most important, that he has singular focus to reach a certain point in life. And he saw himself traveling the world. He saw himself driving some of the best cars. He saw himself flying first class. He saw himself with a network of powerful friends. He saw himself in this space, and this is what it means to be successful. This is what it means to be a good husband. This is what it means to be all of those things. A good business person, or, you know. And to make a really long story short, and you can ask questions to go into detail if you want. But I remember the day it all got disrupted. And I remember the exact moment. It was when Cam told me she was pregnant. The idea of a child did not fit in Steve Bacon's life plan. He had Christian. That was fine. But to have one that he was solely responsible for, that was not part of his life plan. Now, he would say, I could tell these things now because he's dead. And he wouldn't say these things because he was so afraid of how people would look at him if they heard this stuff coming out of his mouth, because he was so attached to this identity of being admired. And he started to drink his own Kool-Aid. You know, when one day he was really a nobody, or at least he felt like a nobody. And then all of a sudden, he's traveling here, he's traveling there, and then people are commenting on his Facebook, "Oh my God, you're living the dream. Oh my God, you're an inspiration." And he started to drink that Kool-Aid like, "I'm finally the guy." Yeah. You know how Jim Rohn would say, right? There's the guy.
Right.
Steve always wanted to be that guy.
Yeah.
And so he started to experience being that guy. And when people would comment and like and all this stuff, because then he got to the point where he only wanted to create posts that he knew would give value. How did he know it would give value? Because people would be like, "Oh my God, this hit me square in the eye. Oh my God, you talking to me today.
You the guy hitting square in the eye."
Right. And he would just get so excited from that. Mm-hmm. It's like, "Oh, I'm making a difference. I'm the guy." But then when people didn't respond the way he wanted them to respond, that didn't match his identity, then it was, "Oh, I ain't shit. I fell off." Right? Mm-hmm. And some of his travel was no longer about him just wanting to experience.
Uh-oh.
Some of his travel was about, how would this look on Instagram?
All for the gram.
How would this look on Facebook?
Yeah.
I have a certain image to uphold.
Right.
People see me as successful now.
Mm-hmm.
So he was drinking his own Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild to see it. Because he was the pinnacle of what he thought a successful version of himself looked like. He's in Italy. He's all these cool things.
Oh, yeah. Paris.
Right? And
London.
People are just feeding into it.
Yeah, yeah. Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and not to mention, he was so good at breaking people through trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Can't nobody touch me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just, I mean, when I say this guy was so into his Kool-Aid, then Cam said she was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And to him, that moment felt like somebody took all of his dreams and just shattered them. He immediately went into survival mode. Because now he had this idea of what it means to be a good dad. He had this idea of what it meant to be a good husband with a kid. Now he was no longer free to just be and take risks and have fun. Now it was real. And he couldn't operate the way he used to operate. Now everything has to change.
Yeah.
Now everything got heavy. Now he woke up every day with it felt like an elephant on his chest. Now I can't just move by spirit. I need to figure out a system. I need to figure out consistency, because that's what it means to be a good dad. That's what it means to be a father. It's all about survival. It's not about me anymore. It's about making sure everybody has what they need. And that was death to Steve Bacon. Because he would talk about, yeah, one day we'll have kids. He never meant it.
Oh.
He never meant it. He would have been fine.
I find it
He wasn't fake.
Yeah.
He just, that was his identity.
For sure.
He'd been after that identity for 20 years.
Yeah, and people chase
He
that.
sacrificed everything
Mm-hmm.
for that identity.
Right. Could that be? I heard this, and people chase things. They chase success. They chase what they think success is, especially in our younger ages. We're pursuing the career, and and as we ascend the career ladder, that's we put value into that, and we see that with pro athletes, right? Their entire career is based on them being this persona in this as an athlete, and then when they retire, in different sports have different lengths of time that the body can handle doing that, right? Shorter in football, maybe a little bit longer in basketball, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But when they leave those spaces, they often have these identity crises. Okay, we see that all the time. But what's interesting is to me, as you're describing this, is that you're describing yourself in the third person. And it's really fascinating to me because it's like, okay, I can see this picture, and the picture that you created of what success was, you achieved, which is amazing.
It really is.
I mean,
as I'm looking back at pictures now, I'm like,
yeah,
wow, that guy had a really amazing life.
Because I don't think demonizing that makes any sense at all.
No,
because I think that is and you're coming into this new evolution.
He proved to himself that anything was possible.
Exactly. And so I got
goosebumps. I'm so grateful.
I would like to celebrate that for a minute, because knowing your story, even as you started from this dark place of wanting to, or not seeing any other option other than ending your life.
Right.
At the ripe old age of 18, to this meteoric rise of having freedom of movement, right? Having financial independence.
Yeah.
Being able to get up and
that guy didn't have a job for a decade.
I'm gonna wake up one morning and go, I'm gonna fly to Panama for however many days and just fly first class and do the thing, and having that kind of freedom and resources to go live that lifestyle. That's amazing.
He did the damn thing.
Yeah,
he really did. I mean, I remember when $3,000 a month was a lot to him,
right?
And then to just wake up one day and go, I'm going to Panama, and buy a first class ticket. And he hadn't had a job in 10 years.
And that was probably $3,000 by itself, right?
And he hadn't had a job in 10 years. Like, the life he built with his own belief in himself.
Right.
My hat's off to that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he really did what he set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
And 100% celebrate him.
Absolutely. And I think not coming from a place of like, oh, I got all these resources. Like you had to build that.
Right.
Like you had to scrap. You had to, sleep on couches, in hookah lounges, and as you were like, I'm determined to do this thing. What's amazing to me too is that your picture of what success was exactly what you achieved.
Yeah.
Like you believed that this is what that looks like, and I'm committed to getting there. So your commitment, your determination, your tenacity and endless pursuit of that is really, you achieved that thing. Like that is what, like you were successful. And I don't like to say the word were because you are successful. But in that story arc of what you just shared, Kaya being the thing that shattered that picture.
I mean, she came through like you're in
a
film.
wrecking ball.
No, she came, like
I'm
film.
coming like a wrecking
Right.
ball.
She literally, and you're in film. She came in like scissors.
Yeah.
And just cut the film.
Yeah.
That's over.
We got a new picture now.
And he couldn't compute.
Right. Yeah.
Wait, because remember, Steve didn't start making real money until like 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
So it's only 2024.
Right. Yeah.
So when I look through all the pictures from 2019 or 2017 to 2023, in that 5-year span, he did everything he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
I was recently at an event and they said, "What's your swimming pool?" And basically it's like, "What's your ridiculous thing that only money can buy?"
Mm.
And I remember there would be times where Steve had a full list. Steve had one thing on the list and he couldn't understand, why is there only one thing on my list? And that was a 2025 Cadillac Escalade, all electric. It's a spaceship.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing.
Wow. I haven't seen the new Escalades.
But that was it.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Why don't I want more?" He was done.
Mm.
He did everything he wanted to do. There was nothing left.
That's still a baller move over a minivan, by the way. Right. Like when we did the minivan thing, when we got to that point.
Oh yeah, no.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we had Jacob. Same thing. I mean, we had Jacob. It's interesting because our story arc is similar in a different parallel universe, and we're talking about suicide, which I'm grateful we are talking about that. I'm grateful that you have the courage.
They're like, "Wait, this episode's about suicide?"
Yeah. No. But you mentioned it. You mentioned it, and I'm grateful that you did, and I'm grateful that you have the courage to tell that story over and over and over again, because that's you stewarding your suffering in a way that serves other people. That is the greatest form of love, in my opinion, and the way I define it, that any human can engage in, is the ability to be able to relive a very painful and difficult moment in the suffering, in the grief, in the trauma, and being able to go through that again and again and again and again and relive those feelings, those emotions, and be able to communicate those, and to serve someone else that gets to hear that. And it helps them. It helps them be seen and heard and feel not alone, and realize, oh, wait, Steve had that experience that I might be having right now. And he was able to overcome it. And it being Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Because as we're sitting here recording, I don't know when we're going to drop this episode, but it's September. And I had those thoughts when I was 18 years old. I didn't have the highest degree of emotional intelligence. My EQ was really low, like most 18-year-olds. And it was a relationship that failed. And I literally in my mind thought we were going to get married and, right off into the sunset, that whole thing. Well, long story short, I screwed up, kissed another girl. The guy that liked the girl I was dating went and told her that I was actually having sex with some other girl, which wasn't happening. Long story short, there was some deception that occurred and just sent her off the deep end. And she was like, "I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. Nothing." And that just sent me into a tailspin. And I did just about every drug under the sun, and I just absolutely didn't care if I lived or not. And now I didn't put a gun in my mouth. I may have tried to run out in the street inebriated once or twice, during that time. And but if you looked at the pattern of what I was doing, you're like, oh, he's trying to kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't care. I didn't see that there was any hope or there was anything to really live for. Like I didn't see any other way out. And that's not true. I made it through. Now there's a lot of things that occurred, music, etc., and it really helped shift my perspective. And I had a picture of what success looked like. And having a family was part of that picture. Unbeknownst, unlike yours, the family was a great idea, but wasn't really in the picture.
Yeah.
Because, who wants to tote toddlers around the world? That doesn't sound fun. And we had a meteoric rise.
Yeah.
After Jacob was born, Emma was born, we started selling some real estate. Things really started just to skyrocket. And we were like, oh, cool, look at our little family. They didn't have the all-electric Escalade at that time, so we ended up with the minivan. Coming back full circle, we had everything was electric. You push a button, the door opens. Judy loved driving that. It was the Sienna SE or whatever, and it was like a space shuttle.
Yeah.
At the time, I mean, this is we're talking 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
And our picture was.
Remember, we also thought it couldn't get better than a Sidekick.
Yeah,
cell phone.
That's right. That's right.
It's like this is the pinnacle of phones.
Oh my gosh, or the BlackBerry. Oh yeah, I got the big one. It's got all the keyboard.
Yeah.
And our picture was, the suburban picture. Nice house on the hill. We've got all the resources we want. We got 4 or 5 cars. I've got 1, 2. I had 3 cars that were just cars that I drove. I had a brand new FJ Cruiser when those dropped, which was 07. Paid for it cash. Had 2 different race cars, like drift cars, and that one was imported from Japan. Like it was bananas. And that was what my picture of what success looked like. Like the whole traveling around the world and living the jet set lifestyle, was that a possibility? Yes, but it really wasn't. With the kids and the family, that was my idea of what that looked like. And then we lost everything because we made the mistake of putting everything in the real estate. All our investments were in the real estate basket because we made a lot of money really fast. And then the next thing you know, we're a family of 5, homeless, sleeping on our friend's couch and in their extra room for maybe half a month before we found another place and started getting back on our feet. But yeah, it's interesting, the picture of what success looks like, and interesting what we can create with our belief, with our determination, and how important the emotional health is. Right?
Isn't that the gorgeous part, though? What you just said. What we can create with our belief.
Yeah.
Cam and I were riding through our neighborhood the other day, and it just hit me.
Did you say riding?
Yeah, riding.
On a bike?
No, driving.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. We were driving through our neighborhood.
Okay, cool.
Please, sorry.
Because I saw Kaya in a little
police.
thing, and I thought, oh, maybe you guys got bikes, and she was in a little trailer.
But we were driving through our neighborhood the other day, and I just looked around, and I saw all these cars parked outside. And I just said, every single one of these people are living in a different world. Same place. Different world.
Mm-hmm.
Which, for those of you that are listening out in TV land right now who are still stuck in the dream, I want you to recognize that there is no one definition of success because everybody's living in a different world.
Right, yeah.
We're all living in the same place, but we're vastly living in different worlds.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the challenge is that we start to define what success is based on other people's worlds.
Right. Yeah.
And if my world doesn't look like Eric's world, then it's not successful. And that's what Steve was going through. Because Steve would look at people and go, now that looks like an amazing life. That's success. So that's what I need to be, or that's where I need to be.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
Only to then get in rooms with people and understand the amount of work involved into having some of the things that these men had or these women had. And him not being honest with himself of he didn't want to do that.
Right.
He didn't want to spend 16 hours a day on the computer constantly building funnels and this, that, and the other. And he didn't want to do that.
Right.
He didn't want to be on the phone 8 hours a day.
Right.
But he made himself feel guilty for not wanting to do those things because he believed that that's what was necessary to get to the level of success that, you know, he desired.
Right, yeah.
But I'm bringing it back to something you said in the beginning, which was what we can create with what we believe.
Right, yep.
And here's the even more interesting part, is that everybody is creating what they believe.
Yeah.
Right now.
All the time.
All the time.
Whether they're conscious of it or not.
That's the only thing there is to do.
Yeah.
Is create.
Right.
And you're either creating consciously.
Yeah.
Or you're creating unconsciously.
Yeah.
And you either know why you are creating what you're creating or you don't know why you're creating. But you are creating.
Yeah.
And that's the gorgeous part. You can't not create what you believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that what's interesting too.
I hope that made sense to y'all out in TV.
Absolutely makes sense. I'm tracking with you. What's interesting too is watching people, and I like to observe. I like to watch. Like I like to see. And part of that is not just seeing what they're doing, but listening to language. And to me, it's fascinating. And sometimes I'll get a little overzealous, and I'll be like, "Hey, can I stop you?" And then point that out, because sometimes I feel like it's my responsibility, if I'm seeing it, that I need to help them see it too. And the new thing for me is
that's an interesting narrative.
Yeah. The new thing for me is that, I mean, part of it's the engineer side of my brain goes, oh well, that data is not factual, and then I'm like pointing out where all the bugs are in the software, but the new thing for me is that I can see like this amazing potential or these amazing gifts in people and just their greatness, and at the same time simultaneously see them holding on to limitations, like fighting for their limitations. Or I'll listen to the languaging that's coming out of their mouth, like, oh, I can't afford that. Like, that's a big one. I remember not too long ago, we were in the middle of a set change production. We're in this production setup, and one of the younger guys, he's like early to mid 20s, and we're talking, and I happened to be wearing Yeezys that day, and he's like, "Oh, someday I hope to get a pair of Yeezys." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I can't afford that." I'm like, "What?" It's like $200. Like, some people are gonna go, $200 for a pair of sneakers? That's absurd. I remember my grandfather bought me my first pair of Jordans. They were $90. They were like Jordan 3s. They were the cements, and he just could not get his. I mean, old school, right? I mean, World War II veteran. He's taking me as this young kid, buy my first pair of Jordans for $90. And he's like, "What in the world are they putting in these shoes that they're $90?" Like, it was just this. But the idea of this, I'm like, dude, you can buy a pair of Yeezys right now if you want to.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, and he just couldn't get past not spending $40 on a pair of sneakers versus $200. I mean, it's not about the money, right? It's about what's possible, right? It's like if you buying a pair of Yeezys makes you feel like you've arrived or something, and it makes you feel some sort of way, then cool, go buy those shoes. Like, who cares how much you spent for them?
Right.
That part of it actually is just a bonus. That's not really the point. The point is that he was holding on to the fact that he couldn't afford those things. Like, it was impossible for him to buy a pair of Yeezys.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, look, it isn't impossible. You just need to give up spending $5 or $6 or $7 every day on a Starbucks for a month. Imagine that. You could buy a pair of Yeezys if you just gave up going to Starbucks. I'm not saying give up your coffee. Make your coffee at home. You could still have coffee at home and wear Yeezys. And not have, not like Yeezys are the end all be all. I mean, and that's just one small example, right? It's like he's creating, kind of bringing it full circle. He's creating that limitation. He's creating that he can't do this thing.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the construct now clear as day.
Yeah.
Like the constructs people create.
Absolutely.
But only because now I've been able to separate the construct of Steve Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can see why he thought everything he thought, why he made every decision he made, why all of that. And then now, because I saw the construct of Steve Bacon, I can see other constructs.
Right.
Right. And it's like, oh.
And the things that fed the identity of Steve Bacon.
Yeah, that. So I wanted to make sure that, because you talked about suicide, so I wanted to make sure that in this particular episode, because people are probably like, well, how did Steve Bacon die? When did that happen? And ironically enough, it was 3 days ago.
Oh, wow.
And I bring that up.
Hence the third person.
Right? It was 3 days ago. Steve had a nervous breakdown.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Now, what is that? I know different people have different ideas.
Well, I'll just say it was the first time. It was the first time he actively thought about suicide again.
Oh.
In 20 years. And it scared him. The thing is, he knew, though, that if he was having that thought in that moment, crying to his father on the phone, and it was actually the first time he gave his father the opportunity to be a father.
Oh, wow.
He called his dad in that moment and just broke down crying. He said, I feel like a failure. I failed my wife. I failed my daughter. I failed everybody. because he could not figure out how to keep this identity that Kaya came in and he wanted to keep the identity that was before, but this new chapter does not include that Steve Bacon. And there was just like this, you ever seen one of those movies where like you see like something, the soul, or like something that there's like, oh, they're demon possessed, and then, you know, they would throw holy water and it was just like, ah, and it would like come back in. You know what I'm talking about? Like one of those movies where you could like,
I don't know what movies you watch.
it's like one of those horror movies where it's just like you could see like the like the separation,
or like when Mr. Smith takes over some other body. Right?
Yes,
like
there we go. That's perfect. Thank you.
We'll get back
Thank you for making that better.
Yeah.
So it was like one of those.
Yeah.
And every time Kaya would scream, it was like one of those moments because he's just like, this isn't supposed to be happening. This is not supposed to be my life. And so when she would, and she got my lungs. So when she would scream,
that's the problem.
When she would scream, she'd make the windows shatter. And so he would have these visceral moments of anger.
Yeah.
Because this is not supposed to be my life. I just started making real money. I'm living my dream. And then here you come and he was angry. Very angry at everything and everybody. Because it was like, you just came and put out my fire. That's exactly how he felt. So she was screaming. He would have these moments. And then it all just, and then, you know, money was funny. And because he couldn't concentrate on business, he didn't know what he wanted. Content is everywhere. People like, your content is everywhere. And that's because what people saw with Steve's content was literally him drowning. Trying to make something work.
Yeah.
Trying to find steady ground again. Right? Because he thought he was drowning. And it's one of those situations where just stand up.
Yeah.
That's what
Dude,
it's
so
one of those
funny.
situations,
You
right?
seen that video with the kid, and he's like,
Like,
holding on to the rope or with the mom.
That was Steve Bacon for a whole year.
Yeah. Wow.
For a whole year. That was Steve Bacon. That's what people saw in his content, right? And so anyway, so he's breaking down to his dad, and he's like, he feels like a failure. And his dad says, that's just in your head. And he goes, I'm so fucking proud of you. And everybody goes through this. You didn't make it, and then all of a sudden you're a loser now. He's like, and what you think Cam's mom thinks or somebody else thinks, it's not really what they think. It's just you're not living up to the expectation you had. And you think that you just completely failed. He's like, that's not true, son.
Right.
And that conversation calmed me down. And I went and I got me a cookie from Costco. By the way, shout out to them Costco cookies. Listen, crumble is amazing.
This is where,
but it's $18 for a cookie.
Yeah.
Costco is $2.50, and you get the same damn taste as a chocolate chip cookie. Shout out to Costco cookies.
Insert Costco ad for sponsoring this episode.
Costco, I will keep telling people that for a free lifetime of cookies.
Okay, here's the burning question. Everybody wants to know what kind of cookie was it?
Chocolate chip.
Okay.
Costco got these chocolate chip cookies that are to die for. Literally, they're amazing.
Yeah, apparently Steve did die for them.
And so I go home, and I'm just numb, laying on the couch, and I turn on the Gaia Network. and I'm watching some documentary around awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm half asleep. It's probably 11 o'clock at night. I'm half asleep. And I had spent the whole day crying my eyes out, trying to figure out. Just like it's kind of like you just throw your hands up. Like, I don't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm half asleep, and I hear this guy go, because Steve was after mastery. I want to be a master. He wants to be a master. He wants to be a master. And so half asleep, drifting off. And this guy says, the self will never attain mastery.
Mm.
You could read all the books, do all the meditating. You could do all the journeys. You could do the cold plunges. You could do all. But if you do it as the self, if you do all of that as the identity,
Mm-hmm.
you'll never attain it, because the identity is what's in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And once you separate the identity, then all that remains is the awareness.
Right, yeah.
And for whatever reason, that clicked.
Yeah.
And I just went, oh my God, there is no Steve Bacon.
Mm.
That is a character. And and I didn't know what to do with it in that moment. I just kind of journaled. And I just said, there is no Steve Bacon. There is no Steve Bacon.
There is no spoon.
Right. And I woke up the next day and I was like, still in this space. There is no Steve Bacon.
Mm.
Thoughts, quiet. No thoughts. Just quiet. No expectations. No worries. No fears.
Mm.
Nothing. And it's almost like joy is what happens when you stop looking for it.
Another thing occurred to me as you were saying that. There's another way, a phrase scripturally that pops up in my mind where it says, the peace that transcends all understanding.
Yeah.
Because that quietness is peace, right? When we on the surface, when we define what peace is, it's calm, it's serene, it's you're sitting in front of a lake and it's peaceful.
Yeah.
Right? There's this lack of chaos. Right? And we can take that same very surface level definition and plug that into what you just described in our mental space.
Yeah, it was the best way I could describe it, and I don't know if I'm using the definition of this word correctly, but it was almost like a psychotic break.
Interesting.
It's just literally watching. It's like it was almost like an out-of-body experience, except I didn't actually leave my body, but mentally I can see the separation happen. Like, there he is.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Right.
It was just a whoa, right?
Yeah.
It was almost like, and our friend Esther, she's extremely gifted, who I now know, she was in charge of waking me up. We had an amazing conversation last night. And she said, that's what Jesus meant by get behind me, Satan. It was the ego.
Mm-hmm.
When you put the ego behind you,
Mm-hmm.
Steve Bacon's there. Don't get me wrong. But now I know he's there. And now, because he'll say, and it's like Esther told me last night, because he'll say, oh, well, you're so awake now. Why don't you do this? And it's like, oh my goodness, I get that scripture.
Yeah.
It's like he's like, hey, hey, now that you're so awake now, why don't you use it to go ahead and, now that you know the truth, why don't you go? And it's just like, don't tempt me. Just,
well, yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like, that's
the temptation of Christ, right? It's like, oh, you can make these rocks turn into bread.
Right. You're so awakened now.
You know, your 40 days of fasting in the desert. It's like, oh, I bet you he could smell the bread coming out of the oven.
It's like, I get that now, right? Experientially.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. So I'm definitely am very aware now of what the work and the play is.
Yeah.
The work is I just get to go around and now share the message of wake up.
Yeah.
You're in a dream.
So what would you, I'm sure someone's probably going to stumble on this episode at some point and they're going to be in that space of darkness. The dog's really going bananas. I don't know what's going on out there.
Ad libs.
Somebody's going to be watching this episode at some point, and they're currently feeling that darkness, that despair, that ending their life is the only answer. That's the only way out that they can see, that they can feel. What encouragement would you have for that person right now?
The thought of ending your life, you can take it one or two ways. If you take it literal, then you will try to end your life. But if you understand what that message really is the identity that you have been so identified with, it's done. And it needs to die. So that you can awaken from the dream that you're in. And if you're in that space, you're not in a dream, you're in a nightmare.
Right.
And it's the identity that you are clinging to. All the thoughts that you have, all of the feelings, the anguish, the shame, the guilt, all of that is tied to the identity. It's not who you are. It's the identity. And the moment you can realize that, you will awaken from the dream and everything will be fine. So it's not that you as the soul want to die, because you as the soul cannot die. It's the soul is ready to awaken to itself.
Yeah.
And the identity is in the way. When that thought of, I need to end it all, only happens when you've reached a level of frustration where you've hit a ceiling with your current identity. You've hit a ceiling. You're trying to bust through the ceiling and nothing's working. You're trying to bust through this space that you're in life. It's like there's an invisible wall there and you can't seem to move past it. But that's because the identity that you are identifying with is limited by nature. You are not limited, but the identity is a construct of beliefs that you have, and that construct of beliefs is the limitation.
Yeah.
You don't have a limitation.
Yeah.
So when you are trying to move past your current belief system and nothing's working, then that level of frustration would cause that thought.
Yeah.
I'm tired of trying.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. Because it's not working.
It's not working, and I don't know what
Nothing's
else to
working.
do
Yeah.
to make it work, and I don't want to keep going through this, and so I need to die.
And the thoughts continue to propagate that, like, I can't do this. That creates, I can't do this.
Right.
Right. So the thoughts occurring, like, oh, I can't take it anymore. So that's what's occurring. The thought occurs. You give language to that, which gives power to it, which then turns into, I believe I can't do this anymore. And then the feelings pour gas on that belief fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then that becomes a reality.
Oh yeah.
And it's a lie. And I'm just thinking, I'm putting myself back into 18-year-old version of me when that relationship ended, and I just didn't care. I was so apathetic because I believed that that was the first time that I felt like this love, if you will, from another person. Because I didn't feel that from my parents, from my, like, so I'll basically give you an example of exactly what you're talking about. I had this belief that I wasn't loved. And here's this girl that I truly felt emotional love from for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, how can you say that? Like, didn't your family love you? I mean, yes, they did to the best of their ability. I mean, I had everything I needed. My basic needs were taken care of. You know, my grandparents would buy me $90 sneakers when I asked for it. So there was that, but we didn't say I love you. There wasn't any kind of affection or hugs or really talking through. I mean, when I say I had no emotional IQ, I mean there was no emotional IQ in the family, period. It was very stoic, and there was no, like, from my mom. I don't have any recollection of my mom saying I love you or giving me hugs or that being the norm growing up. So I had this belief that I wasn't loved. I was a latchkey kid. It was like, here's the key. You know, after school, you come in, you do whatever you need to do. You know, this is, and I felt like more of a nuisance than I felt like, oh, this is my family. And so when that relationship ended as abruptly as it did, and I, in my mind, had created that, like, oh, this is what love is. This is what I've been missing. And now it's gone, and I don't have any reason why. I was like, I didn't believe that that would ever occur again. And I created that, right? I had the thought, like, oh, I did something. And yeah, I did. I screwed that up. And that was the only time that will ever happen. And that it's never going to happen again. And so I was just like, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right? What's the point of living if I'm not wanted or I'm not desired, or that's not going to occur ever again because I don't even know how to do that. And that put me in a very dark space. I created that dark space based on the environment that I was in and the stories that I was telling myself about why the environment was that way.
Mm-hmm.
And developed a belief, poured gas on that belief fire, and that was the mental and emotional state that I had created. And was it true? No, it actually wasn't true. It wasn't true that that was the only person that was ever going to love me. Not true at all. imagine, fast forward to the wrecking ball that you're talking about with Kaya. That was Jacob. Jacob was, and it wasn't the wrecking ball for me. Jacob was that was my picture of success. And I remember just absolutely, I remember we kind of talked about when you first held her and like what the experience was like. And if you're a parent, you get that. You're like, oh my gosh, there's this immense amount of love that you feel. And you start connecting the dots with the creator. And you're like, oh, shoot. And I just had this full-on meltdown because I felt like this degree of love that I was like, oh, this is something else. This is something I haven't. And fast forward another 18 years, and then he takes his life. And imagine how, I mean, look at the environment that I was in, the stories, the work that I've had to do to undo the lies, right? I think what we don't realize in the human condition, which I'm so grateful that you just so eloquently described the construct, right? The construct of belief and the construct of the emotion feeding that belief, the creation that we're doing around the thoughts, the languaging that we're giving to those thoughts, and how that creates the dark space that continues to propagate, that ends people's lives. And I have to continually fight that now and not create some story around why that occurred for him.
You know, that's the most challenging part with death for human beings, is because we don't understand why someone would be done with this life. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be done, so I don't understand how you could be done, because death to human beings who are still in the dream is the ego's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Because it's not you that dies.
Yeah.
It's the ego that dies.
Yeah.
And to the death, and to ego is like, absolutely not. The ego wants to survive. It's the end, right?
End. Yeah.
And so when human beings encounter death, now, in the United States is the only place I've seen where death is hidden.
Yeah, I mean, we're grief illiterate.
Yeah.
And we're death phobic.
Right.
Yeah.
So time. The idea that someone can be done with this life doesn't make sense to people in the United States, because we're an ego-driven country.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about the ego. But when we move beyond the third dimensional realm and recognize that soul was finished, whatever I came here to do, I did. And now I'm done. Because to the soul, this is a constriction. Mm-hmm. I heard Ram Dass put it as a tight shoe.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you've never watched the documentary Becoming Nobody, it's amazing. And he it's a tight shoe. This body, the constriction that comes with coming into human form, it's like a tight shoe. And death is more of like a okay. It's like a breath of fresh air. Mm-hmm. Right? It's an exit from this tight shoe. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like Esther and I were having a conversation last night, and she reminded me that it's like when you watch people die. If you've never watched somebody die, the amount of peace that comes over them, where they're just like, oh, so-and-so's here to get, oh. It's like they can see beyond the three-dimensional world in that moment. It's like for that split second, they could see beyond, and they go, oh, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. It's like, I want to go.
Right, yeah.
Because this is a tight shoe.
Right.
That's really hard for human beings to wrap their mind around.
Oh, for sure.
And so we spend more time in grief than necessary because we're trying to figure out why. Mm-hmm. Instead of just accepting they were done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was nothing you could have did to stop them from being done.
Yeah.
And them being done was not about you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Them being done really was just them being done.
Yeah.
And they're on to a different world now.
Right. There's two things that I want to share about that really changed my perspective and provided this really profound paradigm shift in the realm of death and passing. I've experienced personally people that I know that were close to me, 18 different deaths, starting from 8 years old until my dad's passing most recently 2 years ago. And I heard it said this way, and I can't remember who it was that I heard it from. But this is the first time that my paradigm had shifted. Because when I experienced death when I was 8, like, I'm 8 years old. I don't have this concept of life and death and all this thing. I'm just this 8-year-old boy running around, enjoying whatever, riding a bike, do whatever. And my stepfather's mom passed, and still trying to wrap my mind around it. And 3 weeks later, I wake up in the middle of the night, screaming my head off in sheer terror, because I couldn't figure out what death was. And like there's when I said there was no emotional IQ, like EQ in the household, nobody really talked to me through that. They were probably going through their own stuff, and they just but I think my mom finally did, because she got tired of me. Like this occurred like 3, 4, 5 nights in a row. Mm-hmm. And I would wake up at probably 2 or 3 in the morning screaming in terror of not wanting to die. And I knew my parents could do nothing. They could do nothing. And somebody had said, and so I had this fear of death because I didn't understand it, didn't know what it was, and again, we didn't have a religious household. I didn't grow up having any of those kinds of constructs. And then many years later, I hear this idea that death isn't the end of something, it's the beginning. And when I heard it described like a birth, and they were like, imagine a baby. A baby's got like pre-birth. The baby's got everything he or she needs. Food, like perfect environment, like everything to sustain their life. And they don't have to lift. It's like the perfect condition. Like, all I need is a little window so I can see what's going on outside. And, I would have a womb with a view. But beyond that, their condition is perfect. And then they die to that existence. and are born into this new existence. And I heard it phrased that way, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to go through another birth, whatever that looks like. Like, I don't, the baby pre-birth doesn't know what that looks like. It's just terror, right? It's like, they're going through this very traumatic experience. But on the other side, it's expansive. There's all this other thing that occurs. And I'm like, oh, okay. So death is really a birth into whatever the next existence is. Okay, cool. That's all I needed to hear, to be at peace with whatever that is. And the second thing that I heard that was a big paradigm shift for me was more recently. So Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about when he dies, he wants to be buried, and because he was talking about energy, and he's talking about the science of energy, and he says if somebody's cremated, and different people have different beliefs around, different faiths, etc., which we learned going through the process with Jacob and picking out his casket and all that. When in and of itself was a learning experience and a traumatic experience all at the same time. And the idea of we come from dust and we'll go back to dust. People that get cremated, their energy does what when they're cremated? It releases into the atmosphere, through the process of fire or whatever, and then just out into the ether and just into space. And when people get buried, their body decays, it goes back into the earth, and whether you become worm food, whatever, and you go back to fertilizing the flora and what have you. And he described it as like, I'm right now experiencing this existence and I'm surviving and I'm living off of the earth, the nutrients that are coming from the ground and the plants and the fruit, the vegetables, all the food that comes from that. And then I want to continue that cycle by being buried in the ground.
But is he saying being buried without a box? Because here's the thing. If you're buried in a box, then how are you going back into the soil?
Depends on the box.
If it's biodegradable.
Uh-huh.
But I'm just...
Interesting that you say that, because we learned that in Hebrew Jewish culture that the box that you're buried in is a natural wood box that will decay over time. And eventually a metal box would too, but it would take a lot more time. But if you look at the boxes in typical Jewish tradition, which was the lesson that we got when we were looking for Jacob, and it was like, here's this $40,000 casket that's gold plated that Michael Jackson was born or buried in. And we're like, man, would Jacob want that? Hella Sketchy might have wanted that, but would Jacob want that? We didn't know. And so we're trying to learn about the whole thing, and we come across this natural wood box, and the guy's kind of walking us through. It's almost like walking through a car dealership, and you see all the different colors and models and whatever. And he comes across this natural wood box, which seemed to stand out from everything else because it was not metal. It didn't have all these fancy handles on it. It was, not ornate. It wasn't painted. Like, do you know what the name? Because they all have names, right? The models have different names. Do you know what the name of that casket was?
What?
You have any idea or any
No.
guess? The Jacob.
Wow.
And it was like, oh, okay.
That's the one.
That was it. And, you know, I share that story because you talk about the box.
Yeah, it was just,
And
it was interesting, but
it biodegrades, allows the body to biodegrade into the
amazing.
earth. Yeah.
I want to share this last thing before we wrap up for this episode, because you mentioned something about not having a concept of death, or not knowing. And I wrote down in my notebook when you said that, and I go, children aren't born with a concept of life or death.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a question about what death is. And then somebody scares the living shit out of them.
That's right. When you watch your grandma get put in the dirt, and they start throwing dirt over, you're like,
and somebody goes,
I'm never going to be able to hug her again.
I'm talking about beyond that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about I'm talking about the boogeyman stories.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Death is your judgment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Judgment Day is every day. When you wake up and you have your first thought of the day, that's Judgment Day.
I think that's the end right there. I think that we got nothing left to say after that. Because anything else, that's a whole nother episode.
Thank y'all for tuning in.
Yep.
Thank you for being with us today. Man, we're excited for the next episode, which we're going to record right after we cut this one, because I'll be wearing the same thing. So
except I won't. I'm going to go change my shirt.
Take care, everybody.
Yep.
Have a great Sunday.
Cheers.